Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Friday, October 25th. Your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter at CrosbyBaseball. You can follow the show on Twitter, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. You can also find all of my written work, BravesToday.com. Braves Today is both a newsletter and a podcast. And I had prepared a mailbag episode for today. I had 20 or 25 minutes ready to go of a bunch of questions that you guys sent me about this Atlanta Braves team when Atlanta dropped the news yesterday afternoon of a hitting coach had been brought on. Tim Hyers, hired away from the Texas Rangers. I have to not say hired with hires. That's complicated there. Tim Hyers was brought on from the Texas Rangers. He was actually still under contract with them. They released him from that contract to come to Atlanta. And there was a couple things to really like about this hire. So we're going to get to your questions in the second segment. We're going to talk about his offensive philosophy. We're going to talk about who he is as a person and a player and what he's done in the past. The big thing for Tim Hyers, the first thing you need to know is he's a local guy. He fits the mold of what Atlanta likes to do with their players. He went to Newton High School, 30 miles east of Atlanta. He was taken by the Blue Jays in the second round in 1990. He played through 1999, played for the Padres, the Tigers, the Marlins, 133 games in the majors across 4 major league seasons. Him and Alex Anthopoulos actually overlapped a little bit, okay? A was in the front office of the Los Angeles Dodgers. This is after he left Toronto, before he came here. When Hyers was the assistant hitting coach for the Dodgers. After Hyers left the Dodgers, he went to Boston, where he won a World Series in 2018 as the hitting coach. He then went to Texas, where he won a World Series as the hitting coach in 2023. He is very accomplished as a hitting coach, and his teams have performed very well. So in his 7 seasons that he was the lead hitting coach for Boston and for Texas, his teams finished 6th or better in the majors in OPS+. They were first in 2018 when Boston won the World Series. They were second in 2023 when the Rangers won the World Series. Now, similar to this year, or similar to this Braves team, the Rangers struggled with injuries last year. They went from 3rd in OPS in 2023 at a 789 to 23rd in 685. And that's Atlanta was the same way. They went from 845 in OPS last year to 724, which was 12th this year. Atlanta had a similar thing because of the injuries. But here's the big difference in the Rangers offense this year and the Braves offense this year. The Braves offense was bad with runners in scoring position. 247 with runners in scoring position, on base of 314, one of the lowest marks in all of baseball, right? Under Tim Hyers, the Rangers were top 3 in both of those same things. They batted 271 with runners in scoring position, and they had a 357 on base percentage. Both of those, again, top 3 in all of baseball. They were able to hit with runners in scoring position despite the injuries. Atlanta was not. And so ultimately, I think that is why Atlanta made this change, okay? What is Tim Hyers all about, and why should you be so excited for him? Okay, he has a multi-pronged approach to coaching hitters. The first thing is he wants to understand what he calls your holistic approach, okay? This is the natural way that you want to hit. Maybe you're a Sean Murphy and you swing for the fences every single time. Maybe you're a guy who likes to pull the ball. Maybe you're a guy that wants to hit early in the at-bat. Maybe you're a guy that hunts for specific areas of the zone. Maybe you're a guy that hunts for specific pitches. He wants to understand what you want to do at the plate. Okay? His job, the way he says it, is he's trying to, quote, move the needle a little bit with each guy. So he wants to find ways to make you a little bit better at the way that you already are trying to hit the ball. Okay. He talked about information overload, right? His job is to take all of the analytics information that is given, is produced for every game by the front office, by the analytics staff. His job is to take all of that and distill it down into just one or two things that he can send you to the plate with so that you feel better prepared. Because so much of hitting, like, you have to have the physical talent to do it, but so much of hitting is mental. Whether it's your recognition of what the pitches are doing from a physical perspective, like literally, can you see the spin? From your understanding of what the pitcher's trying to do, the sequences, and all of that. From your confidence levels going to the plate, all of those things. So much of hitting is mental. So what he wants to do is find ways to optimize, to tweak, to move the needle a little bit on your natural holistic approach. And he talked about it's not just information, right? Maybe it's strength and conditioning. Maybe you sit on breaking pitches or off-speed pitches because you struggle with bat speed catching up to fastballs. Okay, that's a strength and conditioning issue that he can work on. Bat speed training is a thing. The Boston Red Sox are really good about having their prospects do bat speed training, and their prospects have gotten better from a hitting perspective because of it. Maybe it's a medical thing. They've got to work out something to help you stay on the field. Atlanta's a team that posts. That's not really a huge issue for Atlanta. Yes, they didn't stay on the field last year, but for the most part, this is not an injury-prone team outside of a couple players, like we talked about Ozzie Albies on Wednesday. But his whole thing is, I want to simplify things for you and make your holistic approach as good as can be. And the quote here, like, for what his goal is, if everybody is confident, ready to go, and has that one intention or that one game plan that they want to accomplish at the plate, then we can have more as a team, battling the pitcher with that 9-on-1 type mentality. They're more confident and more aggressive, ready to take it to the pitcher instead of being on defense. And he reiterated, his goal is not to give them too much information. He wants to simplify that one thing that they're trying to do. That one, he called it the one intention, right? You intend to swing at breaking pitches on the inner third of the plate so you can pull it down the line. You intend to fire off on high fastballs up in the zone because you can get the bat head out in front of it and you can get a home, you can pull it down the line, whatever you want to do. His job is to get that. He still believes in slugging. He still believes in on base. He still believes in hitting home runs. That is a more sustainable offensive approach than trying to go out there all the time and just string together base hits. But unlike what we saw this team do last year, and what Kevin Seitzer admitted he was just unable to get into the guys' heads, Tim Hyers does prioritize changing your approach from time to time, right? And this is I'm just going to read this quote directly, okay? Because this is a quote talking about the need to change the approach from Tim Hyers. Quote, "There's days when you're facing an ace and we're going to have to single him to death, when we're probably not going to be able to hit 3 or 4 home runs, but we've got to scratch some runs out." And that's when late in games, it's in those close games that we value some of the situational hitting, just to scratch out some runs to make sure that we benefit our pitchers that are holding the opposing offense close. How many times last year did we see this Atlanta Braves team? The pitching staff would go out there and hold some other team to 3 or 4 runs, and Atlanta would score 1, and you'd lose 3-1, 4-1, 3-2, 4-2, things like that. Tim Hyers wants to fix that. He has a proven plan to fix that. And again, it's tweaking what they naturally do. This is not a wholesale approach to what you do as a hitter. We're not going to take a guy who's pull happy and all of a sudden turn him into an all fields hitter, right? Now, there are situations when Tim Hyers is going to ask a guy to do that. Another quote here. "Utilizing their swings to be able to use the whole field. Take those layups to the opposite field if we need it, or the game tells you to do that." he's what the essence of what Tim Hyers is. He is a hitting coach that wants to make you the best version of yourself at the plate. Make you the best version of what you already are. And what so many of these Braves hitters already are power hitters. These are guys that can slug, they have good exit velocities, they have power. And his approach is, when we are able, I am going to make you a better version. I'm going to tweak you and make you better at doing that thing that you want to do. But in return, when there's a runner on third and one out, and we're facing Garrett Cole, we're facing Tariq Skubal, you have to do me a favor. And if you can shoot one down the left field line and score that runner, you got to do that. Okay? You can't always do your thing. If this is a situation where you need to just put the ball in play, that's what you got to do. That's the trade-off that Tim Hyers is trying to get. And it's something that Kevin Seitzer admitted when he gave that post-firing interview to David O'Brien of The Athletic. He admitted that he was not able to get that across to these guys. And Tim Hyers is a guy that has been proven to have not only the same offensive philosophy as Kevin Seitzer, and again, what this roster is built around, which is hitting for power, but also has been proven to be able to get that message across. I specifically did not want to dive into all of the different options for hitting coach, because there's so much of this stuff is, one, kind of unknown how these guys work. There's so much turnover in this. It's very hard to stay on top of that. But looking back at it now that you have somebody, this is one of the better hires I feel like you could have made in the league, right? You went from the longest tenured hitting coach in baseball, the one who won Baseball America's MLB Coach of the Year award last year, to a guy who has been shown to believe in the same things as Kevin Seitzer, but also is not only more willing to adjust when you need to adjust, but more proven at getting his hitters to do that. And I think that's a big thing. So that's why you should be excited about the hire of Tim Hyers. Again, I got to stop doing that. I got to stop saying the hire of Tim Hyers. That's very hard to do. In just a minute, we're going to get to your questions. Lots of questions for the mailbag today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Encase Cards. This is a custom trading card manufacturer, playing card manufacturer. Encase Cards takes your source photos of whatever it might be. For me, it's U Sports, right? Both of my kids play in U Sports. My daughter is in U10 soccer. My son plays T-ball. He's played for the White Sox. He's played for the Brewers. He's played for the Mariners. I'm waiting for him to play for the Braves. They keep giving him non-Braves teams. But you send your photo of your youth sports participant, whatever this might be. Maybe you're a musician and it's a picture of you on stage. They do that too. Encase Cards, their artists will personalize a card for your child. They will add in stats. They will add in position information. You're a musician. Maybe they add in your discography on the back, whatever it might be. And then they print it on high quality cardstock. They slab it and they ship it to you to keep as a keepsake. So check them out, ncasecards.com. That's ncasccards.com. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby breaking down the addition of Tim Hyers as hitting coach for the Atlanta Braves. There is still an assistant hitting coach position available. They are going to fill that. They reportedly are not going to fill Sal Fasano's catching coach position. So, but either way, you have now added in a crucial part of the offensive coaching staff prior to free agency, which was important. Everybody's a free agent the day after the World Series. You can start making external signings 5 days after the World Series. In the meantime, we had a lot of questions that you guys submitted. I'm going to have to go through them a little bit faster than I had planned, because obviously I went from 25 minutes to do so to about one segment here versus two because of the hire of Tim Hyers. I did it again. But I want to get to some of these questions. Aussie Fan 755, subscriber to the Substack since day one. Love you, buddy. Thanks for being here. had a question. Do you believe the Braves will do another bummer type trade where they send 5 players for somebody that they believe in? This question was on the 40-man roster breakdown story that I wrote, the newsletter that I wrote for Braves Today, that then became a podcast episode on here. And what he's referencing is last offseason, the Braves cleared out the 40-man roster. They sent one minor leaguer, Riley Goins, but then they sent Nicky Lopez, Braden Shoemake, Jared Schuster, and Michael Soroka to the White Sox for lefty Aaron Bummer. And for a guy they believe in, what Ozzie fans referring to is Atlanta has proven pretty good. I think I mentioned this in maybe yesterday's bullpen show about finding guys who underperformed who underperformed at their previous destinations and putting them in better situations. Pierce Johnson's a great example of that. He had bad stats in Colorado. He had great stats when he got here. They re-signed him. Aaron Bummer last year had a 6.79 ERA for the Chicago White Sox. His fielded independent pitching was over 3 runs lower at 3.58. So they traded for him, cleared out the 40-man roster to do it. Aaron Bummer's ERA this year was 3.58, which was his fielded independent pitching last year. But even then, that was an underperformance. His FIP was 2.23 this year. From an inputs perspective, Aaron Bummer was one of the best relievers in baseball this year. That's what he's referring to by another package deal. And I could absolutely see Atlanta moving some guys. There are players on the 40-man roster that, to me, should not be coming back next year, should not be in your future plans, right? Dylan Dodd. You barely used him at all. They just do not believe in him. He was pitching in relief in the month of August in Gwinnett, right? We already saw Darius Vines got DFA'd and sent to Double-A. Alan Winans made, I think, 2 starts last year, did not get called back up the rest of the year. Huascar Yanoa is arbitration eligible. He's also out of options. So if he doesn't make the team out of spring training, then you could potentially lose him when you send him down to the minors. Maybe he's a bullpen arm. I don't know. But he feels like a guy who is probably not, you don't have the flexibility on him. It was the same with Michael Soroka. You didn't have the flexibility with Michael Soroka because he was out of options as well. And so I do think you could see something where a Dodd, a Winans, a Vines. He asked about Ian Anderson. I don't know about Ian Anderson. That depends on how Atlanta feels about his ability to start at the major league level next year. I don't think that they're going to move on from Ian Anderson just yet. I believe he has one more year or one more minor league option. So this would be the final season where you could theoretically say, we can keep Ian Anderson because we can move him back and forth from the majors and the minors. But after this season, if he doesn't work out, he doesn't get to the point where he can consistently compete in the majors and stick in the majors, then we absolutely cannot bring him back because we can't move him back down. It's entirely possible that they do that. And so maybe he's in there. I don't expect him to. Same thing with Bryce Elder. I don't expect Bryce Elder to be a guy that is moved in that situation, but I do think you could see them clear out the 40-man roster on some sort of deal. Now, on a guy like that, or a trade like that, you're not getting anybody awesome, right? You're not getting Dylan Cease for something like this. You're not getting Garrett Crochet for something like this. But you can find a team that is not contending and give them a few of these guys and get a piece back, a bullpen piece maybe. Maybe they look for a flamethrower with poor control that they think they can fix. Maybe they look for a guy like an Aaron Bummer who can get a lot of ground balls but had a bad defense behind him, something like that. So I do think you could see a deal like that simply because Atlanta doesn't feel like they're just going to wholesale give up on guys that have a little bit of value. They can extract something out of them. C. Breezy on Twitter asked, would you do this deal? And this is a doozy, okay? 3-way trade between Atlanta, Cincinnati, and Seattle gets Matt McClain from the Guardians. From the Reds. Jorge Soler from the Braves. prospect pitcher Giancarlo Lara from the Braves, and $10 million to offset Soler's $16 million salary. Cincinnati gets starter Bryce Miller, outfielder Mitch Haniger. Atlanta gets shortstop J.P. Crawford and pitcher Brent Suter. I do think that you could see Atlanta move on from Soler this offseason if they think that he's not going to be able to get to the point where he can play left field. Okay. I do think from a money perspective, getting rid of that $16 million would be useful simply because a lot of other salaries are coming up. This specific deal, I don't know if Cincinnati is going to be willing to move on from Matt McLain. It feels like Jonathan India would be the one they would trade before Matt. McLain missed the entire year because of injury. India went from being a potential trade target in the offseason to them needing him and then having to add position players in the infield during the year. Obviously, it feels like the trade hinges on Seattle getting a shortstop back, so getting Matt McLain. I honestly wonder, could you just make a trade with Cincinnati straight up? If they're moving McLain, could you just make a trade with them straight up for Jorge Soler and some pieces? Obviously, they get a starting pitcher in there, a good starting pitcher. I do think their starting pitching's pretty decent. So I don't know if this is a trade they have to make unless they just think Bryce Miller can be a front of the rotation guy. Seattle, I would not be shocked if Seattle wanted to move on from before his deal ends, get some sort of value out of J.P. Crawford. I do think they could use the offense. Only $6 million for Soler. Feels like it wouldn't be the end of the world. I think Haniger's money would offset that anyway. It's an interesting deal. There's a lot of moving parts. I don't ultimately know if Cincinnati moves on from Matt McLain. I do think if that offer's on the table and I can't just get McLain directly from Cincinnati, I do think he'd be a perfectly fine shortstop, then I would consider it. But I think my preference would be to just get McLain from Cincinnati. Just get him directly. If he's on the move, get him. And again, I just don't see them trading him, but it's entirely possible. Don Braves said, what's a massive trade that seems realistic enough for the Braves to make? That was a pretty massive trade. That was a pretty significant trade. I have seen some other trades for Luis Castillo is another one I think that came up. Again, that's a money thing for Seattle. He's the biggest contract on their roster. The Rangers are reportedly cutting payroll. I do think you could see Atlanta reach out to try to make some sort of deal there. People mentioned Adolis Garcia. I don't quite know how that would work with your existing outfield. That would be fun to have him in the outfield. I don't quite know how that would work out with your existing personnel group and everything. Something of a scientist asked, if Nacho shows enough in spring training to justify a roster spot, but struggles in the regular season, do you let him play through the highs and lows of the season or consider him a quad A player and move on? I think it's incredibly early to write off Nacho Alvarez. He has relatively, very little time. I think he did not have a ton of time in AAA this year. He struggled at the major league level when he came up. It was 8 games. It was 32 at-bats. He has, I believe this is 246 AAA at-bats last year. And he batted .297. I do think it's too early to give up on Nacho Alvarez. I do think if he makes the roster out of spring and struggles, you send him back down. You absolutely send him back down. You're a World Series contender next year, and you cannot afford to have a struggling shortstop any more than what you're already getting from Orlando Arcia, right? But I don't think they give up on him. It is too early to give up on him. And that is absolutely not a thing that really should be on the table, right? He is not really being given up on yet. Fletcher Keel asked, why are the Braves never in play for players from Korea or Japan? Is it a, quote, too many resources in the Caribbean thing? Or is it a, they don't want to spend that much money thing? This one's tricky. Some of these organizations that have done really well with players from Japan have put a lot of resources into that. The Chicago Cubs, the Los Angeles Dodgers, obviously Ohtani and Yamamoto, and they got started early. Yamamoto had multiple visits with Steve Cohen of the Mets early, a year before he posted. I think some of this is just your resources can only go so far. And a lot of these players, and this is not a stereotype or anything, a lot of those Japanese players have more concerns than just the money or the quality of the team that they would be joining. The relationships, the long-term relationships, do mean a lot to them. The fit of the city, as in the makeup of the city, the demographics of the city, all of that stuff do also matter. From what I've been told, the Cubs have done a lot of work to build those relationships in the Pacific Rim. They also apparently have a sizable Japanese component of the city of Chicago. So I do think it's an area that they need to, I think, be more involved in. It's also, there's so few players that come that they could be the third runner-up on all of these guys and we'd never know about it, right? They could be doing some of this work. We just haven't seen the tangible results yet. I do necessarily think that this is definitely an area that could be improved in. My question would be, how much would it cost? And would you get if the funds aren't unlimited, which we're assuming they're not unlimited, is it a good return on investment to do that? And I honestly don't know, right? There's so much we just don't know about international free agency. I do feel like more players are open or have expressed interest in coming over because of the success of an Ohtani, of an Imanaga, of a Yamamoto. And so you may see this start to pick up. And if it does, Atlanta needs to be more involved in that. We just don't have a lot of information about how much Atlanta is working to build those relationships in the Pacific Rim. And that's Japan, that's Korea, that's the players in Australia. Australian baseball is becoming a thing, and all of that. Dustin had a really good question here. Two interesting questions here. The first one was, when do you think MLB will make the investigation results known on David Fletcher? Because that could free up money or be a call-up if he's cleared and he's needed. I think the David Fletcher thing, we have no idea how long that's going to take. The investigation is that he was involved, or that he's been involved in some gambling stuff in the past. I believe he was the person that introduced Ohtani's interpreter to the bookie or whatever it was. Like, he's implicated in some of those things. Not directly with Ohtani, but just in some of the gambling stuff in general. He's been investigated for that. I think the Fletcher thing is more of just quality of play, right? They let him come up. They didn't really trust him to play shortstop at all. He didn't really get a lot of play time. He didn't do well in that play time. I think it's more of that. This is the final year of money on the deal. He's not on the 40-man roster. I honestly think they're content just letting him play it out until he's done. After this season, the money's gone off the books. You don't have to worry about it anymore. The fact they put him in AA and not AAA means, and that's physically it was in Mississippi, means they weren't worried about getting him here as a top option for a call-up. I don't necessarily think they have a lot of belief that he can be a contributor at the major league level going forward. He's probably an emergency option more than anything else, honestly. Dustin also asked about the Diamond Sports bankruptcy hearing. Does it affect the Braves' offseason plans at all? I don't think it does, simply because the Braves are one of the only teams Diamond wants to keep, right? That's because the value of the TV deal, it was signed by Turner Media prior to them selling the team to Liberty, is understood to be incredibly undervalued. It's part of the reason that Atlanta has done all of that work to get additional revenues from the Battery and things like that. You can blame Turner, probably a small part of that, for the team moving up to Cobb County, because the team had to increase revenues in other ways because the TV deal was so bad. I don't think the bankruptcy hearing impacts it that much unless the judge rules, in essence, that Diamond has to divest of all MLB, period. If they completely sever the relationship completely between MLB and Diamond, I think the most extreme outcome is that. And that's the only real way it impacts the Braves, because now you don't have a broadcast deal for next year and you don't know what your revenues are. And the Braves are a spend what you make team. The payroll has gone up every year, as AA told us, because the revenues have gone up every year. And if you remove that funding source, even if MLB steps in and takes over your broadcasts like they did the Diamondbacks, like they did the Padres, like they did the Rockies, the money won't be the same in year one. But unless the judge takes the most extreme outcome, which a lot of people don't see that as likely, I don't think it impacts Atlanta at all. Diamond has fulfilled every obligation to the Braves because they have paid the Braves on time, as we understand it's on time. They have paid the Braves. Whether or not they had a deal with Comcast to show the games, unfortunately, does not pertain to the Braves at all. That does not break the contract. So Diamond wants to keep the Braves. We have no way of seeing a way out of that deal unless the bankruptcy judge severs the entire relationship between MLB and Diamond, and that feels unlikely. Last question, do you think we're going to re-sign Max Fried? I do not. I expect Max Fried to be one of the higher paid pitchers in free agency. He's one of the ones that he's had nagging injuries. He's not had anything serious other than last year's flexor strain. And he's been one of the better performing posting pitchers since I had that in a show, 2019, 2020, 2021. He's posted more than almost anybody else with some better results than almost everybody but Garrett Cole. I do think he signs a long-term deal. Atlanta gives him an offer. He takes a deal outside of their price range and is unfortunately not back in Atlanta. It sucks. I don't love it. If there is a player I would go above the $22 million arbitrary imagined ceiling that Atlanta has, it's Max Fried. I just don't think they do. This has been Braves Today for Friday, October 25th. If you have any more questions, send them to us. We'll put them into the next mailbag episode. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Crosby Baseball. Shows at Braves_today. We have a Facebook and an Instagram as well. And BravesToday.com for all of the written work. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.